Welcome to Surrender School. So welcome to Surrender School's Big Book Study. We are doing the Big Book Study from the recordings of Joe and Charlie. And Joe and Charlie were from Alcoholics Anonymous. They got together in the 70s, found that they really loved the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and started studying it together. And what they learned, they started sharing with other people in Alcoholics Anonymous and doing speaking engagements. And in one of those speaking engagements, someone recorded it and became known as the Joe and Charlie recordings. So that is the method that we're using. They're using nothing more than the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And today we'll look a little bit at the 12 and 12, but just for a couple of slides. And they always like to start their talks with, they are emphatically indicated that they are not gurus of Alcoholics Anonymous, that is Alcoholics Anonymous, the book, or the Alcoholics Anonymous, the fellowship. They are just two people that have gotten together and have a passion for the big book and like to spread that. They do not speak for AA as a whole, just as Joe and Charlie do not speak for AA as a whole. I do not speak for AA as a whole. I do not speak for any 12-step organization. I simply have a passion for the big book, and I like to carry the message as best I can. So let's get started. So today we are going to be going over how it works. We're going to be studying steps 1, 2, and 3. So if you go to Surrender School and you go download this PowerPoint presentation, anything in this color blue that says how it works here is going to be a link. The how it works is going to link you to the video. The steps 1, 2, and 3 will link you to the online big book. So we are at week 6, and I think I need to change that. Sorry about that. So the layout of the book that we're looking at is we've already done goal number 1. We found the problem, and the problem is powerlessness, of course. So we found that the problem, or step 1, was found in the doctor's opinion and Bill's story. And then we went over step 2. There is a solution, more about alcoholics, more about alcoholism, and we agnostics. We did that last week. So we are completed with step 2 by doing that. And today we'll begin how it works, which is chapter 5. And we will begin steps 3 and 4 sometime today. So step 1, we admitted that we're powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Let's go ahead and turn to page 58 of your AA Big Book if you're following along, or you can always go to the online link that will allow you to go to aanetherland.org to be able to see the online version of the Big Book.
This is one of the greatest pieces of information that I have ever learned, is I can have my own God, and he dwells within me, and my knowledge comes from him, and through him I'll be able to find that power. Now then, am I ready to make a decision? You betcha. When he was a God of justice, when he was hellfire and brimstone, I wasn't ready to make that decision. But throughout this chapter, my concept of God has changed entirely, and I'm beginning to believe he just might be a kind and a loving God.
So let's find out what happens. So we're going to be looking at how it works once again, page 58. And we're looking at the Oxford Group's 4 absolutes and 6 tenets. We're going to start with that. And Charlie's going to start us off, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the 4 absolutes and the 6 tenets, and a little bit of history as well.
Absolutes that the Oxford Group had said you were to practice absolute love, absolute purity, absolute honesty, absolute unselfishness. And these alcoholics were having a hell of a time being absolute anything except drunks, you know. Also, they had made their own little steps, 6 of them, which came from the Oxford group tenets. And Bill could see loopholes in these steps that the alcoholic mind was slipping through. And he knew that they were going to have more strength. And he knew they were going to have to be expanded. But he didn't know how far. By that time, AA had really divided into, you might say, 3 factions. In Akron, where Dr. Bob was, they didn't have any problem with God. Dr. Bob was a highly religious man. He used the Bible. He insisted everybody he worked with use it too. God was no problem there. But the New York City people were an entirely different breed of cat. They really didn't want anything to do with God if they could avoid it. They would have preferred a book dealing with the mind rather than spirituality, period. And there was finally a third faction that had said, well, let's talk about God, but let's don't talk about him too much. Let's come down somewhere in the middle of this thing. So Bill's trying to satisfy them all. And he said he tried and he tried and he tried and he tried to get started on chapter 5. This is going to be the directions on how to recover. And said I put down the pad and the pencil and said I prayed and asked God for help and direction. And he said I meditated for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And he said, then after a while, I reached over and picked up the pad and pencil. And he said, it felt as if the pencil had a mind of its own as it raced across the pages. In less than 30 minutes, he had written how it works. One of the greatest pieces of spiritual information the world has ever seen. After he had written it, he went back and numbered these proposals, and he found out there was 12. Now, Joe's going to read how it works from the original manuscript, which most of you have probably heard before. And if he reads through there, I think you'll be able to see the differences between what Bill wrote that night and what the fellowship forced him to change in order to have what we have today. Let's go through it for just a moment and see the differences.
We will be going through that. So how it works, the original manuscript can be found on a link. And that link, I think, will maybe be able to put in chat. I'm pretty sure. But if not, you can always take a look at the next slide if you download it from Surrender School, and how it works original manuscript will actually be posted there. And if you're interested in reading a little bit more about the 4 absolute and the 6 tenets, across the top of this screen, the Oxford group says 4 absolute and 6 tenets. That what is in blue is a link, and you can go to those sites, and of course you can read a little bit more about them. So the original how it works is slightly different from the one that we see today on page 58 and 59. So if you have your big book, you can read along on page 58, and you'll be able to spot the differences as we go through. Some of them are pretty stark, but most of them are very, very minor. So we'll start with Joe reading from page 58. And this is something we read in almost every 12-step meeting that we go to. We'll read how it works.
How it works, the original manuscript. He said, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our directions.
Not our suggestions, our directions.
Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a way of life which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. Now, if you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you are ready to follow directions. At some of these, you may balk. You may think you can find an easier, softer way. We doubt if you can. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that you are dealing with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for you. But there's one who has all power. That one is God. You must find him now. Half measures will avail you nothing. You stand at the turning point. Throw yourself under his protection care with complete abandon. Now we think you can take it.
There is more to that, and there's the next screen. But moderator, would you please post the first question? The first question for everybody, if you're following along with me, that if you'll answer in chat, I won't be able to see the chat, but if you will answer in the chat, we can talk about it at the end. Are you constitutionally incapable of being honest with yourself? And it took me a while to understand that, but the answer for me is that sometimes, yeah, if I'm being honest, it is absolutely true for me. Constitutionally incapable of being honest with self would mean at the core being, one is not able to see the truth about themselves. And in my mania of addiction, that is indeed the case for me. I can tell the truth. I cannot tell the true from the false. I can't see what it does to me. I can only see what it does for me. So in those cases, once I've put it in my body, triggered the allergy, and off on a spree, I am constitutionally incapable of being honest when it comes to my drug of choice. So yeah, that is my answer there. So I'd love to hear from you and hear what your answer is. We're going to continue on with the 12 steps because you know that comes right after that rarely have I ever portion. So we are going to continue on with the 12 steps, and you're going to see just a slight differences what we have in the 12 steps today versus what we had in the original manuscript.
Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as your program of recovery. 1, admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care and direction of God as we understood him.
Over to the care and direction of God as we understood him. Remember that. We'll refer to it later on.
4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God and to ourselves and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely willing that God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly, on our knees, ask him to remove our shortcomings, holding nothing back. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make complete amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our contact with God, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual experience as a result of this course of action, we tried to carry this message to others, especially alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all of our affairs.
And so we're going to continue on, but we're going to be looking at the 3 pertinent ideas in the ABCs as it continues with how it works, the first few pages. I think at this point we're on page 59, if you're following along in your big book. So once again, 3 pertinent ideas.
Now you may exclaim, what an order, I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we've set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Now our description of the alcoholic.
That's the doctor's opinion, Bill's story, some of it in chapter 2 and 3.
The chapter 2, the agnostic.
Chapter 4.
And our personal adventures before and after.
Bill's story and those in the back of the book.
Have been designed to sell you 3 pertinent ideas. Well, Bill was a salesman, you know. A, that you are alcoholic and cannot manage your own life.
Step 1.
B, that probably no human power can relieve your alcoholism.
Step 2.
C, that God can and will.
The rest of step 2.
Now, if you're not convinced on these vital issues, you ought to reread the book to this point, or else just throw it away.
The other thing that is so apparent is when he says, back here about the three pertinent ideas. If I can find it again. I don't trust my memory that good anymore. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after have been designed to sell you three pertinent ideas. He's talking about the doctor's opinion in the first 4 chapters and the stories in the back of the book. And if we've been sold on those 3 pertinent ideas, A, that we're alcoholic and cannot manage our own life, then we're through with step 1. If we've come to believe that no human power can relieve our alcoholism and that God can and will, then we're through with step 2. Now, the very next statement says, if you are convinced, you are now at step 3. You see, the fallacy in trying to start somebody in chapter 5 is it starts with step 3. And it's hard to start with step 3 unless you've got 1 and 2 behind you. People come to us today and they say, well, how do you work steps 1 and 2? And our answer is you don't. They are not working steps. There's no action involved here. These are conclusions of the mind that we draw based upon information presented to us in the doctor's opinion in the first 4 chapters.
And I did not know that step 1 and 2 were not working steps, because I always thought I was working the step. And those are steps that I take outside of my 12-step community. I have to be powerless. I have to be before I am on my knees enough to go in and get help. And I have to believe that something powerful, more powerful than me, is able to relieve my my affliction. So yeah, this is really great news for me. So now we're going to be on page 60, and we're looking at a little bit more the discussion to take action. And once again, we're on page 60. Moderator, would you please post the 3 questions? Are you powerless? Do you believe in there is a power greater than you that can restore you to sanity? And 3, have you made a decision to take action? And we're going to look a little bit at this. Let's find out a little bit more about this.
I've always been powerless over alcohol. My life has been unmanageable because of that. I just did not know that, nor did I know why, until I read the doctor's opinion in the first 4 chapters. There's always been a power greater than I am could restore me to sanity. I just did not believe that he would, nor did I understand the insanity until I read the doctor's opinion in the first 4 chapters. Now, if I can say to myself today, you betcha, I'm powerless over alcohol, my life is unmanageable, I'm through with step 1. If I can say to myself today, I have come to believe there's a power greater than I am can restore me to sanity, I'm through with step 2. And now then, I'm ready to look at step 3. Now I might make a decision.
Being convinced we were at step 3. We haven't took step 3 yet. We were just there, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. Well, just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? Well, that's a very good question, isn't it? What does step 3 mean? Well, we're going to make a decision. That's part of it. To do what? To turn our will. And what is our will? Our will is our thinking, and our life is our actions. We're going to make a decision to turn our will and our life over the care and direction, that's what the step used to say, to God as we understand him. Our will is our thinking, our life is our actions, and we're going to make a decision to let God direct our thinking and direct our life in step 3. Haven't done that yet, but we're getting willing to do that.
I've always heard a lot of people say one of the most misunderstood steps in the big book is step 4, and I'll agree with that. But I don't think step 4 is any more misunderstood than step 3 is. I hear people today say, I've been in AA about 5 years, my life's still all screwed up, and I don't understand why, because I turned it over to God 3 years ago when I took step 3. No, we don't turn anything over to God in step 3. We make a decision to do something in step 3. And the decision itself implies we're going to have to take some further action to carry it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take a little bit more action to carry it out. I too have always been powerless over my alcoholic foods. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And my life is unmanageable because of it. And I too never knew the why behind it. And yes, I do believe in a power greater than me. But like Charlie, I never believed that I was worthy of having that type of time and attention from a power that great. Um, I have made a decision to take more action, to be relieved of the obsession of the mind and the physical allergy. So those are the answers to my questions, to the questions, and I'd love to hear from you and what you put in the chat there. So we're going to go on to a little bit more on how it works. We're going to look at the will, thinking, and mind, and how those things are all the exact same thing. So let's hear what Charlie has to say about that.
You know, a good example of the word will, tying it together with mind. And let's say that some of us are beginning to approach the end of our lives, which a few of us in here are. And we've gathered up a few material things, and we become concerned with what's going to happen to them when we pass on. We'll go down and sit down with an attorney. Now, that attorney will take my thinking coming from my mind that day, write it down in legal terms on a piece of paper. I'll sign it, the attorney will sign it, and we'll put it in a safe. Now, a year or 2 or 3 later, sure enough, I kick the bucket. And when the ceremony's over, they start dropping me down in that hole. Now, if my family's like the rest of them, they're not even going to wait till I get to the bottom of the hole. As soon as I start down, they jump in the car and they head for that attorney's office. And that attorney gets out that piece of paper and reads to them what my thinking was 2 or 3 years prior to that time when I was sitting there in that office. We know they call that piece of paper a will. It's not by accident. Will, thinking, mind are all synonymous. I'm making a decision to turn my thinking apparatus over to the care and direction of God as I understand Him. Now, what else am I deciding to turn over? Well, I'm deciding to turn my life over to the care and direction of God as I understand Him. And what is my life? Well, my life is nothing more than my actions. What I am right now, as of this moment, is the sum accumulative total of all the actions that I've taken throughout my entire lifetime has made me what I am today. All action is born in thought.
Say that again, please.
All action is born in thought. Sometimes we react to a situation so fast we think we do it automatically, but we don't. So if all action is born in thought, then it stands to reason my life is going to be determined by how I think. If my thinking is okay, chances are my actions will be okay. Chances are my life's going to be okay too. If my thinking is lousy, chances are the actions that I take will be lousy, and chances are I'm going to have a fouled up life too.
All action is born in thought is what motivated me to put this slide together. It's many times I've got returned to my alcoholic substance and I've said, oh, there was no thought process in it. But yeah, that action for me to pick up that moment was born in a thought. It might have been so quickly that it might have felt automatic, but it was born in thought. So I just wanted to share that with you. So we're going to look at directed thinking. And I will have a comment at the end of this, but I really would love to hear what your thoughts are at the end on directed thinking.
Now, when I got to this stage of the program, I went to my sponsor and I said, I don't think I'm going to be able to take step 3. And he said, why? And I said, because if I turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him, I have no idea what He would have me be. And He may want me to be a missionary. And He may send me to China. And I sure as hell don't want to go there. And he just laughed. He said, well, let's look at it this way. He said, at least it wouldn't be in the hands of an idiot, would it? He said, let's look back through your lifetime. He said, you've always been a selfish, self-centered, self-willed human being. You've always done what you wanted to do whenever you wanted to do it, and the hell with the rest of them. Is that right? And I said, well, you know it is. He said, the end result of that is that you almost destroyed your life. And he said, just as importantly, you've almost destroyed the lives of those around you that care for you. He said, just think. If God could direct your thinking, it might become better. And he said, if your thinking becomes better, then your actions and your life's going to become better. And he said, just as importantly, the lives of those around you that care for you would probably become better too. But he said, Charlie, left on your own resources, you're always going to do the same things you've always done. You're going to remain restless, irritable, and discontented. You're going to stay filled with shame, fear, guilt, and remorse. And he said, sooner or later, under those conditions, you're going to go back to drinking again. He said, if you don't find some way to be sober and have a little peace of mind, serenity, and happiness, you'll never have any long-lasting sobriety. And he said, you can't do that on self-will. And he got it through to me in such a manner that I was able to make the decision to turn my will, which is my thinking apparatus, and my life, which is my actions, over to the care of God as I understood him.
And I would like to reiterate at that last paragraph at the bottom. If I don't find some way to be free of my addiction that plagues me, or to be abstinent, and have peace of mind, serenity, and happiness, I will never have long-lasting freedom from my alcoholic substances. I will not. And I can't do that on self-will. Trust me, I've tried. I can't do that on just the fellowship. Trust me, I've tried. I have to cultivate a relationship with a God of my own understanding. So let's hear the requirement as it is for us to start this direct thinking and get free. And we're on page 60 currently. And also they're going to make a reference to the 12 and 12. There is a link at the bottom here that'll take you to the 12 and 12. That's also on aanetherlands.org, that if you wanted to go take a look at the 12 and 12 online, you can do so as well.
And he gives us these little instructions here now. They're going to come short and sweet. We'll have to be prepared to see them. And he says the first, so he's going to tell us what to do first. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. Wouldn't that be nice that everybody would mind? Now, some 12 or 13 years after Bill wrote the big book, and after many, many years' experience with some of the great teachers and minds in the world, and after many, many years with experience with us alcoholics, Bill was forced to write the 12 and 12. And the 12 and 12, again, is just a short essays, short stories about the steps. And it doesn't tell you how to work the steps. It is the short stories about the steps. The only piece of literature in AA that tells you how to work the steps is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. In the area of the fourth step, in the 12 and 12, there was some of the best information the world's ever seen on about self-will and what makes people tick. And it's called the Basic Instincts of Life. And I always suggest to people that I sponsor that they go to the 12 and 12, read the first 3 or 4 pages about the basic instincts of life, get a working knowledge about the words that you see in there, and then look them up in the dictionary because they're very important words. I mean, we're going to use them a little later on in the third column when we get ready to do the 4-step inventory.
I think we have to face the fact that in 1937, 38, and 39, when Bill was writing the big book, he was not a spiritual giant. He was not a great student of human nature. Surely, God took a hand in the writing of the big book and used Bill's hand to write the book. But by 1950 and 51 and 52, Bill knew a lot more about spirituality a lot more about human nature, a lot more about we alcoholics than he did back in the 30s. Studied with some of the greatest minds in the world for a period of years. And I think he felt that he had some new information that he could give us that would make it easier for us to work the steps according to the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous. Basically, that's what he says in the 12 and 12. That the Big Book has always been the basic text and always will be. You simply cannot work the program out of the 12 and 12. But there's some information in there that is absolutely invaluable, that if we can see it and understand it and accept it, it makes the working of the steps out of the Big Book so much simpler and so much easier.
Moderator, would you please post the handout? Because on the next slide, we will be using this handout, and it might be beneficial for people to be able to access it for themselves, to see it themselves. Of course, you can follow along. Additionally, the link, I also provided you a link for the 12 and 12, and it will take you to the basic instincts of life if you click that link, so that you can read about them yourself if you've not had the opportunity to do so. It's actually fascinating reading if you have an opportunity. So now let's take a look at this handout, and it is the basic instincts of life, which creates self. Looks a little confusing, but we will break it down. We'll break it down section by section as they talk about it. So this will probably be the longest listen. It'll be over 4 or 5 slides that you'll have during the session, but let's break it down for you. We're going to start, one moment, please. I'm going to start with the social instincts here.
Let's look at them for just a moment. I think it'll make it a lot easier to be able to see why we need to make our decision in 3. Plus, it sets us up really with information for step 4. Now, in your handout sheets, you've got a little picture in here about the middle in there somewhere. I think it's page 7 and 8 in your handout material, which says the basic instincts of life which create self. And he said all human beings are born with 3 basic instincts of life. They are God-given. They're absolutely necessary for survival of the human race. Therefore, they are a good thing. The first thing he talked about is the social instinct. And he said all human beings are born with a desire to be liked, to be accepted, to be respected by other people. He uses the term companionship. And that's nothing more than wanting to belong or to be accepted. So many of us grew up on the outside of the crowd, looking in, wanting to be, and knew we could not be. He uses the term prestige. That's wanting to be recognized or to be accepted as the leader of the group. Most people will take one of 2 directions. Either let me be a part of or let me be the leader of. In either case, it's based upon what other people think of us. Self-esteem. Self-esteem is what we think of ourselves. And that's usually high or low based upon what other people think of us or what we think other people think of us. If it feels like they reject us and they don't want us, then we feel pretty lousy toward ourselves. Pride. Pride is an excessive and unjustified opinion of oneself. We either think too well of ourselves or too little of ourselves. In either case, it's not the truth. Personal relationships is our relations with other human beings in the world around us. Ambitions are the plans for the future. To be basic instinct he talked about is the security instinct. That all human beings are born with the desire to be secure in the future. Said if we didn't have that desire, we wouldn't provide the food, the clothing, the shelter, the things that we need to survive. So this desire that we have to be secure in the future is a God-given thing, and it is necessary for our survival. Now, once again, if you're going to be secure in the future, you have to decide, well, what is it that I need in order to be secure? Third basic instinct he talks about is the sex instinct. He said all human beings are born with a desire to have sex. Now, it may get turned off by bad teachings or bad happenings, but he said all human beings are born with a desire to have sex, because if we don't have sex, we can't reproduce ourselves. And if we don't reproduce ourselves, sooner or later, the human race is going to fail to survive. Yeah, it's plain that a life run on self-will can hardly ever be a success. The fulfillment of these things are so pleasurable that all human beings from time to time will overdo in one or more of these areas and create pain and suffering for others. If you'll notice on that little chart, there's a circle called self. You also notice coming out of the self circle, there's one called wrongs, which is another word we need to look at. Somewhere we got the idea that wrongs meant a list of dirty, filthy, nasty items. But if you go to the dictionary and look it up, you'll find several definitions of it. One definition of the word wrong is incorrect judgment of other people. A little later on, we're going to find out that's exactly what a resentment is. Another definition of the word wrong is incorrect believing. A little later on, we're going to find out that's what most of our fears are. Another definition of the word wrong are the harms and the hurts that we do to other people. Now, it's easy to spot a selfish, self-centered human being, one who's running on self-will, not running on God's will. A selfish, self-centered human being is always scared to death. Can't depend on God. Can't depend on other people. And if we're an alcoholic reaching the end of the road, we can't depend on ourselves any longer, and we're running absolutely scared to death all the time. Selfish, self-centered human being, in order to fulfill the basic instincts of life, are always overdoing and creating harms and hurts for others. Then we got to be scared to death of what they're going to do when they catch us. And even if they don't catch us, if God dwells within each of us, we know the difference between right and wrong, and guilt and remorse associated with those things begin to eat us up. Now, a person whose mind is filled with resentment, a person whose mind is filled with fear, a person whose mind is filled with guilt and remorse does not feel good. And eventually, searching for a way to feel better, we begin to think about the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a couple of drinks. At the very least, we're going to have to do something about this selfish, self-centered human being, and it seems the only way you can do anything about that is through God's help, because God made self-will, and only God has the power to overcome that. At the very least, we're going to have to do something about these resentments and these fears and these guilt and remorse in order to find the peace of mind, serenity, and happiness for good long-term sobriety.
And the remaining steps will help us do that. It'll help us find and assist us with finding relief from the self-centeredness that keeps us in our addictions or in our alcoholism. So if you're still hanging with me here, excuse me, please turn to page 62 in your big book. And this is where we will start looking at the root of our troubles. What actually is the root of all of our troubles? So we're going to start to hear from a little bit from Joe, and then I think Charlie's going to finish it up.
All human beings from time to time will overdo in one or more areas, creating conflict for others and for themselves. I never knew that. I just knew I was always in trouble. I just knew I was always madder than hell. I just knew I was always scared to death. I knew guilt and remorse was eating me up, but I didn't know where it came from. See, they gave me the rules, but they never taught me how to play the game. AA's taught me how to play the game. And now that I know how to play the game, I don't break the rules anymore, and I don't hurt other people, and I'm not scared to death, and I'm not filled with guilt and remorse. This is the greatest information I have ever seen about what makes me tick and what causes me to do the things that I do, Joe.
Page 62, it said, whatever our protestations are, most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, and our self-pity. And it's not that I thought too well of myself or that I thought too little of myself. It's that I thought of myself only. That was my problem. So it said selfishness and self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. And we're driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation. But we invariably find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later put us in a position to be hurt. You know, alcoholism, I, self, and me. See, if you don't have a God in your life, and I didn't, There's only one thing left to live by, and that's the satisfaction of these basic instincts of life. And I tried to live my life based upon those satisfaction of those basic instincts, and I overdid in many, many of those areas. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. We must, or it kills us, and God makes that possible. Can't heal a sick mind with a sick mind. Only God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of himself without his aid. Many of us have had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we would like to. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. Well, this is the how and why of it. See, he told us how it works. Then he told us why it won't work because of selfishness and self-centeredness. And now he's going to tell us how it really works. Well, this is the how and why of it. It tells us what to do first. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work.
Everything I read leads me to believe this is a God-directed world. Now, if it is a God-directed world, then those of us who have been self-directed, and those of us who tried to direct everything and everybody around us, we've been trying to do God's job for him. We're not God. We've just been playing at being God. And the book says we're going to have to quit doing that if we want any peace of mind, serenity, and happiness in the future. I think one of the great mistakes I see today in AA is people trying to force themselves to be better. And self-will cannot overcome self-will. Only God can overcome self-will. So if we want any peace of mind, serenity, and happiness, it looks like we're going to have to turn to God and let him be the director, let him do his job, which is direction.
Next direction. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director.
Not our suggester, our director. He's got his word back now. From here on, it'll be directions.
He said he is the principal, and we are his agents. He is the father, and we are his children. He said most good ideas are simple. And this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we would pass to freedom. And what is that idea, this concept? That he is the principal, and we are his agents. He's the father, and we're his children. He's the boss. I work for him.
Wow, that is very powerful because many times I am like Charlie. If you actually listen to this full thing, Charlie talked about treating God like a genie in a bottle, me just rubbing on the bottle, making a wish, and not actually putting any work to get anything done. So absolutely, I agree with almost everything that they said here. So I've got to quit playing God and allow my higher power to be the higher power. So now let's start to look at how to change or be reborn. If we want to live happy, joyous, and free, we've got to do something about it. We've got to take action. And I think we're on 63, bottom of 63, top of 64 here.
Page 63, it says, now when sincerely took such a position, the one just described, all sorts of remarkable things followed. Said we had a new employer. Being all-powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. See, he's not going to do my work well. I'm going to do his work well. And established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. See, I was always a taker, and takers are losers in life. Contributors are those that win, I've noticed. And see, as we felt new power flow in, and as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, we became conscious of his presence. We began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. Can't do that. He said, when I'm talking to you about being reborn, I'm talking about the renewing of your mind. Old ideas cast aside, new ones accepted. Reborn in my mind. I understood that then. And now I'm ready to do business. I'm ready to do the third step, step 3. He said, many of us said to our makers we understood him. God, I offer myself to you to build with me and to do with me as you will. Take away my difficulties that victory over them may bear witness that I would to bear witness to those that I would help of your power, your love, and your way of life. May I do your will always. He said, we thought well before taking this step, making sure that we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him.
We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. I think the word utterly means completely, wholeheartedly, all the way, the entire ball of wax. I hope you don't make the mistake I did. First time I took step 3, I got on my knees, which I very seldom did in those days. And I said, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do that will. Take away my difficulties, so on, so forth. And as I finished it up, I said, now this applies to my alcohol. Don't fool with my sex life. Stay out of my money. I can handle that too.
God probably said, water and order. I can't go through with it.
I said, you take the alcohol and I'll take care of the rest. Well, today I realize the fallacy in that is, as far as I know, God doesn't even drink. He don't want the alcohol. He wants me. I think we need to realize this is really the decision we're making, to turn our entire will and our entire life over to the care and direction of God as we understand Him. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. You know, back in the beginning, there was never any question about this. The new person was expected to take this step in the company of other human beings. The first step in the Oxford Group tenets was surrender. And when a new person got ready to surrender, they would take them upstairs in Dr. Bob's house. 3 or 4 of the older members, they would all get down on their knees. The new person would make his surrender. Then after he was through, the older members would vote on how well he surrendered. If he didn't do it good enough, he'd probably have to do it again later on.
It does bring us to the conclusion of this week's How It Works and steps 1, 2, and 3. So next week we will start part 1 of step 4. It is a 2-part series for step 4 because it really is a lot of information to get through. So with that,
thanks for recovering with us.